Hello, good evening, good morning, good afternoon to all our viewers wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to CoSAFF, the Coalition of South Asian Film Festivals from North America. My name is Siddhi Ghai. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm from the Tasveer South Asian Film Festival in Seattle, which is one of the 7 festivals that have come together to create CoSAFF. CoSAFF is the largest South Asian film festival this year and was created in response to the COVID-19 pandemic in support of South Asian filmmakers and festivals which are inclusive of all South Asian voices around the world. The festivals in CoSAFF include the Sphere South Asian Film Festival, Seattle, Chicago South Asian Film Festival, DC South Asian Film Festival, Mosaic International South Asian Film Festival, Mississauga, Nepal America International Film Festival, South Asian Film Festival of Montreal, and Vancouver International South Asian Film Festival. At this time, we wish to acknowledge those Indigenous nations and people on whose land we live and work. I am in Seattle, so I would like to acknowledge the traditional lands of the Coast Salish people. We are grateful to respectfully live and work as guests on these lands with the Coast Salish and Native people who call this land their home. We also reaffirm our commitment to the Black Lives Matter movement alongside various organizations who are fighting against human injustices around the world. Before we begin the rest of our program, we would like to take a moment of silence for those families who have lost loved ones from across the globe due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you so much for joining us for this live screening of Our Animated Lives. A big thank you to our sponsors and event partners for helping us put together this wonderful festival. If you are enjoying our festival, we would love to hear from you. Please write to us either on our CoSAFF social media channels or you can email us at cosaff@tasveer.org. That is CoSaffat@tasveer.org. To the audiences watching, we will be taking your questions during this Q&A. So please send your questions to our panelists at slido.com using the event code #26350. Again, the event code is #26350. The link is also in your description of the video below. So make sure to send us your questions. And now, without any further ado, it's my honor to introduce our panelists. Our first panelist is one of the directors of WADE, Upamanyu Bhattacharyya. Upamanyu and Kalp. Kalp and Upamanyu met in 2011 while studying at the National Institute of Design in Ahmedabad, India, and have been working together ever since. After graduating, they co-founded Ghost Animation, pushing the envelope of a return to quality 2D animation. Wade is the first independent film by Upamanyu and Kalp. Our second panelist today is Asavri Kumar, the director of A New Normal. Asavri Kumar owns and operates the studio Supernova Design, through which she creates commercial and personal projects while collaborating with POC and women artists. Drawn to cross-cultural narratives, Asavri uses character-driven storytelling to parse her evolving cultural and political identity. Through her work, she hopes to generate a discourse surrounding ideas of home and belonging and finding where her own narratives intersect with those around her. Our next panelist is Kiran Joshi, the director of Mandala. Kiran Joshi, an animation veteran and director-producer, is the co-founder and CEO of Incessant Rain Studios. He has over 2 decades of technical, artistic, and management experience in Hollywood's film industry. Prior to Incessant Rain Studios, he was the visual effects supervisor at the Walt Disney Studios, where he worked on films such as Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, The Lion King, to name a very few. Last but not the least, our final guest today is Safeer Manzoor from director of Cyberchondria. Safeer Manzoor is a Pakistani CG artist. He is a postgraduate of the National College of Arts, Pakistan, where he earned a master's in multimedia arts in animation in the year 2020. Safeer is currently working at a leading game studio in Pakistan called Mindster Studios as a 2D CG artist. Cyberchondria is his first film. So, welcome, guys. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Hey.
Welcome.
Hi, Subi. Thank you.
Hi.
Good to be
Hi.
good to be here.
It's our pleasure to have you all. Thank you very much. So, let's dive straight in. This is our animation blog. And when we think of South Asian cinema, animation is still not that very prevalent, even in independent cinema. So I want to start off this discussion today with the question, why animation? Why did you choose this form of visual arts to portray your stories? So feel free, whoever wants to take it.
Well, the for me the thing about it is I think in Southeast Asia and in most of the Asian countries, people look at us as people who are working for other studios, like big studios, right? They think of us as people who are doing just outsourcing. But to be honest, uh, actually, we have such amazing stories. The whole world of culture, art, and stuff that we grew up with and that we learned about, and this part of us, our DNA, which is part of, yeah, has not been exposed to the Western world. And so I think from an animated point of view, we have so much potential to tell the stories. Like when we are so used to watching all these movies from Disney, DreamWorks, and they're all like fantasy movies from Hans Christensen, European folklores and all. But we have our own stories, and I think that's where I think the excitement is. And I think we're gonna see with with panelists like we have here, we're gonna start seeing more and more very refreshing, unique stories to the Western world, and it's taking Eastern art-based thing to the West. I think that's what excites me. Uh, and that's my. I think that's what everybody is trying to strive for. I think that's good. That's fine. And animation is a great medium because you can really, you're not only telling them the story, but you're also showing them the style, the visual art form, and everything. Whereas if you go and and not to put anything about live action, you're doing live action. You're going there, you're going to a city and all. But in terms of animation, there's so much potential, and I think that's what's very unique.
That's a great answer. Safir, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I choose the animation because from my childhood, I always inspired by the cartoons, and when I grow up, I see that the animation has a target audience is more wider than the videography, I must say. But when I graduated, my parents were like, "You created cartoons, you create cartoons." Made, and I said yes. And that's it. And the second thing is I am good in drawing, so I choose animation because I want to become independent in doing everything and don't want to have a team. Like if I go with a camera, I need a team, actors, lighting, and you know all over things. But in animation, I can sit on my computers, I can concern with other people and do the art and animate it from my side. That's it.
That's an awesome way to look at it. Upmanyu, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I mean, it building on what Safeer just said. Like, there's a lot less dependency. You can meaningfully say that it's a small group of people, and you're quite unlimited in terms of what you can end up doing. In the
Okay.
sense, you in the case of our film, you can't flood a city, you can't hire tigers. So even if you want to execute a certain kind of ideas, regardless of how realistic you want to go, it is animation eventually. In that
Yeah.
sense, whether it's VFX or whether it's the kind of 2D animation that we do. And for us, especially given that we have a lot of beyond just the stories, like Kiran was saying, we also have a lot of visual heritage of our own in terms of the way we draw, the way we see things from that point of view as well. So it's a nice way to put the stories together with that as well. So when we're exploring styles, when we're exploring visuals from that point of view, we have a lot to build on already. So it's interesting to tap into that.
Thank you for sharing that. Asavri, do you wanna finish?
Yeah, I feel like everyone sort of mentioned a lot of things that I feel are like so true about animation. I just want to add that I feel like when you're specifically talking about personal stories, or if you're dealing with material that has more, or a character's interiority, I feel like animation is something that services that really well. So especially with films that are personal, or they're sort of exploring the inner workings of someone's mind, I feel like animation is a really effective medium to communicate that, because it sort of, like Safeer mentioned, allows you, an exquisite amount of control over like exactly what you're making. But it also sort of, it's not like it's suspending the idea that you're looking at something real. So it does speak to like a larger audience. It gives you that space to sort of project your own experience onto it, which is, probably why it communicates, across like a larger viewing base. But yeah, I think that's something that's very, very unique about animation.
Yeah, that you guys have said it so well, like 4 different perspectives, but saying the same thing about, animation giving you all the freedom, and even what Kiran and Upamanyu said about, our backgrounds, and we are having so many stories, not just from like one, like, say, suppose you take one country or one region in South Asia, every region, every aspect has, that different story. So thanks, guys. Thank you so much for that insightful answers. Coming to your films, apart from the fact that, they're beautifully told animated stories, I also found that humanity was a connecting theme in all your films. Humans, their behaviors, actions, and the consequences. Wade and Mandala kind of deal with the meta existence, and a new normal and Cyberchondria explore like the day-to-day lives and thought process of humans. So, Kiran, I want to ask you, I want to begin your film questions with you. I love how you depicted that both male and female energies are, and equality in their balance create life, right? The symbolism of their playful love leading to creation of life was just simply breathtaking for me. So, where did this idea come to you from? Like, what was the inspiration behind Mandala?
So, when I was working at Disney, and I love all the things that they used to do when Walt Disney, the Fantasia pieces, which was driven with music and, and just takes you into a different dimension. And I've always wanted to do something like Fantasia. So I thought, like, why not do an animated piece that is so much part of our culture, but also introduce the music? And that's where the idea of Mandala came. And then for me, also the concept of like everything that is happening in this world right now, we're all running around chaos and all the thing, that if we just step back and just take a breath, it's really about this moment, everything at some point would cease. And how do you make this particular time more valuable? And that's where the whole idea of Mandala really resonated with me. But also like just drawing from the experience, like, I left Nepal when I was 19. And, I grew up watching a lot of Hindi movies and all. And the idea of this playfulness, right? We have these two deities in Mandala, Kala Chakram Visamada. And the interesting thing about those characters are like they are actually not only found in Buddhism, but also in Hinduism. They basically are, deities that crosses over. And there's so much, people talk about religion. There's so much things that are common. And I felt like this is a perfect way to bring various religion, deities together and then have that playfulness. Like when we watch Hindi movies, when there's a song comes and, there's this playful romantic, and you notice that in Mandala also, I made the the female to be a little bit more, more romantic. She's the one who is leading, and the guy is like, so so I try to do that and try to bring a little bit of that sensibility to that, and there was a lot of fun in that.
Thank you for that answer. That was amazing, and I love what you said about everything being about this moment, and to add to that, like this moment is what is going to lead to the future, right? And with that, Upamanyu, I wanna come to your film. Some of my favorite scenes are the beginning shots where you show us what the future can hold, right? You show us the greens of Sundarbans in 2019, and then you show the dystopian today, which is, of course, the future, where because of human actions and neglect, all the beauty seems to be wiped away, and everything, including Taj Mahal, is immersed in the water. Each and every detail in all the frames are so meticulous, like the broken McDonald's board, from that to the roads and buildings of Kolkata. So what was the driving factor of choosing Kolkata as the backdrop? Like Kolkata is pretty much, you see the film from Kolkata's view. So did you do like location hunting? Did you then in turn it into storyboards? And why show a dystopic version of Kolkata? So if you could talk a little about that.
Right. Well, why choose Kolkata? I was born there. I understand it. It's a friend in that sense. So it's I don't. If you just choose a place that you know to the degree that, let's say, the place you were born and the place you understand best, you don't have to location scout. You just know in terms of what you like, what kind of. So from our point of view, to make a point about climate change, we didn't have to make it very dystopian. So Victoria Memorial and all these buildings that you see, they're pretty much as is. There's just water, and even like if a cyclone happens now, you'll see it. It will look the same in that sense. So we had a super cyclone over here in the month of, I think, May. The same situation: deserted streets, flooded city, and actively the city is such that it deals with so much humidity, so much proximity to the Sundarbans and everything, that there is already a big damp problem. Everything crumbles. Like you can't build anything here that lasts in that sense. So as in, we didn't have to take too far a leap of imagination in order to pay. So that there's no massive layer of dystopia on top of what already is in that sense. And even as far as humans in a flooded area living in close proximity to tigers is concerned, you just need to drive 40 kilometers south from here, and it's already the reality. So it's not. It's again, a lot of people's existences do seem like science fiction to people elsewhere, but a lot of it is steeped in reality in that sense.
When you say that this is not too much into the future, it kind of scares you, right? Like it kind of makes you think about, like Kiran was saying, like you're saying, our actions in the now and what it can be in the future. So wow, when you say that Kolkata is like that, it's kind of little scary. But Asavri, I'll come to you a little on the sweeter side. So first of all, thank you so much for taking us on the sweet journey of this family. The need of freedom for the girl, for the daughter, and the parents being supportive, even if that means that the kids have to move to a different country. That was depicted so beautifully. But that's not a very South Asian norm, right? So it could be that, it couldn't be that. So does this story have like a personal meaning to you? Where did you come up with this script?
Yeah, I mean, I think so because a new normal was made for a specific theme, and the themes were actually home, identity, and belonging. I sort of turned inward again, but I wanted to sort of have some distance from the story while it's still being personal enough for me to have the sort of like right to tell it. So I kind of framed my understanding of home through the eyes of my family. They were actually, and just to give some context, ever since I moved here about a decade or so ago, I've been stuck in various sort of, like loopholes or like jumping through hoops of the immigration process. So it's been very hard for me to actually go home from my parents to come here. So there's been a lot of distance, and the way I am hoping to bridge the distance is through involving, my family in my work in some way, or through like processing that through personal stories, because there are physical limitations to where I can and cannot be. And I feel like filmmaking is so personal. That's a way, in a sense, that's like my way of processing and parsing everything. And somehow when you put on the filmmaker hat, you're allowing yourself to ask questions to your parents or other members of your family, which you wouldn't dare to ask as a child, or like as someone that's like related to them. Like I definitely have like that relationship where I feel like filmmaking allows me to break down walls. It gives me the sort of power to ask certain questions that feel very like, not something you can like discuss very freely. And obviously people have different relationships with their family, so I'm not saying this applies to everyone. But I wanted to frame the story through the eyes of my family, because my sister moved away from home as well. And so I wanted to kind of ask them the questions that would then sort of define this journey as seen through the eyes of different people, and kind of then show them the film, and then sort of, gauge their reactions as to like, so then the people that are involved in the film can also sort of look at it from like a bird's eye view. So once you sort of externalize something very internal, then it becomes something that is more comfortable to engage in a discourse about. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Of course it does. So, but yeah, I mean, it's amazing that you got to use your family for this. And I totally love the fact that you can ask them some questions that, that's the beauty of art. I think, we don't realize, especially in South Asia, that it opens up so many doors for conversations. But talking about family, let me tell you a personal story. It's kind of like a running joke in my family how I am a big time self-diagnosed hypochondriac. And Safir, I am totally guilty of going down the Google, or as you call it, the Boogle spiral, right? But on a very serious note, your film showcases the seriousness of this issue and how one really needs to make sure to get the correct diagnosis. Why was it important for you to base your first film on this topic?
If I speak truth, I need a topic for my thesis, first of all. And I want to really make a thing that has a meaning. So when I observe things, the people actually doing this when they have a headache, they go to Google, and when the COVID hits, and people go on internet and searching things, and you have seen many videos on social media like comedies. If you do this, you can save from COVID-19 and blah blah blah. And the Google is not a doctor, I must say. When you search something, a symptom, Google will connect it to the cancer. It will show you the last stage. And we have a book in our course, it's called A Man Who Was a Hospital. So you can say it is a digital version of this book. So I think this is it. People are doing this forth and go now. Yeah.
No, but this is such a, as I said, like people don't take this seriously, but this is such an important observation that you've made of like human behavior.
Yes, actually, on YouTube, everyone can upload a video. You don't know a doctor or a medical expert, and you are doing his opinion and testing on yourself, which is very dangerous. So I think we should go to the medical expert, and that's it.
Absolutely, absolutely true. Upamanyu, coming back to you, I want to ask you, your animation it was really interesting for me because I noticed some of the characters did not have the black of their eyes. Like for instance, the girl on the plastic bottle raft and the mother tigress, right? Both of them did not have the black of their eyes. Was this to signify something, or was it just like a designing decision?
So in general, all of the characters have these very small pupils as a factor of terror and looking at the sun in that sense. So just a design decision that ended up working. And those two we did we did want to imply some kind of a connection between the two because the mother tigress singles her out in a sense. And on a literal level, we thought if we played her as blind, like that's why she gets left behind and that's why she gets carried around on the plastic raft. So like it has a bunch of things that we were trying to play with in terms of how the characters could play off each other in a situation where there's no words, half the characters are animals, and yeah.
No, but that's the thing, right? Like with such tiny, minute details, you elevate your storytelling, just by not giving them the pupil of the eye. It's easy for someone like me who doesn't have any background in the film and how you're coming from to make that connection between the girl
Yeah, and
and
it's
the
interesting what people do with it when they see it. Like my grandmother decided they are both dead. So like, okay, cool. Yeah, let's go with that. Like, yeah, that works. That's a
Yeah.
perfectly valid interpretation. Yeah.
Yeah. Talking about design, Asavri, I know you spoke a little about the theme of the film because it was based on a particular theme, but I know you use the technique of augmented reality. That is something that is very new period, right? Like forget coming to South Asian cinema, that is such a new technology. Can you talk a little bit about augmented reality and then in combination with 2D animation?
Yeah, actually, it's interesting that we're discussing like technique, because the film, I would say that it's not even like animated in the traditional sense, because the festival was a large part of like the piece that I created was it was made for like a grant by Adobe, and part of the requirement was to use this augmented reality app that they've launched recently called Adobe Aero. So what it allows you to do is sort of superimpose your art onto like realistic surroundings, and the intent is for you to incorporate augmented reality in your existing art practice. What was really interesting about the timing of creating this piece was it happened during COVID. So I was limited in terms of where I could shoot. So I could shoot either in my studio or in my home or in the neighborhood around me, and I couldn't get close to people. And because it was sort of a documentary style thing where I collected sort of interviews from my family and pieced them together into a story, and then I sort of created like visuals to tell the story in an abstract sense. Sometimes the visuals matched the story, sometimes they spoke to the subtext of what is being said. And the sort of benefit of doing something like this was that typically in animation you'll create your foreground, your background, and composite everything together into like one seamless piece. This for me was like real-time compositing. So I created a character and I shot it in like my living room or the garden or like the studio as if I would shoot a real actor, but there was like no danger of COVID because it was like a 2D character being shot. So I think a couple of things just sort of came together in this very serendipitous way. I feel like augmented reality is essentially you're looking at an existing space by enhancing it or like modifying it in some way. And so because that was in some ways that was a larger purpose of using this app, it also became interesting to use during COVID because we're stuck in the same spaces and we're limited in using the same spaces. So you can sort of add your art to a real space and kind of see it through a different lens. So
That's so interesting, right? Like, yes, this year has been so difficult and the pandemic is hard, but these are the silver linings you see, right? Like the innovation in art and, you not being dependent on so many people. Just, like Safeer said that he did animation because he wanted, you don't have to be dependent on a big crew. So Safeer, your story is so versatile, right? That it could be any genre. But your sound design was so effective that it made me like sit on the edge of my seat and just like watch. So it created that sense of urgency in me of like, okay, you know what? I should really not do something like this and go to a doctor if something's bothering me. So my question is, why did you choose this genre and not say like comedy to give this message? And what was the thought process behind the sound design?
I think because sounds plays a very big role in
Mhm.
everything. Like if in a game or a movie or anything, sound has a equal importance. It creates the mood, I think. ठीक है? And the second thing is I want to show in a serious way, not in a comedy way. Uh, Maybe I'm serious person. It's come out of me. I don't know. But I think it's a serious topic and should be portrayed in that way. And the sound is also I created that was serious. That's it. I think.
So, did you work on the sound, or did you have a sound designer who was working with you? How did the process work?
I totally work completely myself, all alone, because I want this product uh, totally made by me. So, yes, I consult some people, my teachers and friends for that. But I think I did it all by myself.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's amazing that you could do this as a single, as one person, one man unit. That's phenomenal.
I
Talking
think
about
that
sound,
an
sorry.
artist has a sense of everything like rhythm. If you are good in painting or sketching, because drawing teach you many things. When you are doing a live drawing, you are watching light, weight, material. You are doing many things in at a one time. So it's a practice of your mind. And when you go making a film on that, you are seeing so many perspective like this. I think I explained it well.
Yes, you did. Absolutely. So thank you. Thank you for that. And like how your film created that sense of urgency. Kiran, your like the sound and the music in Mandala created that, playfulness of like, oh, this is so adorable in your film. And I love the fact that in your entire film the deities are playing, and towards the end they meet and they become one. And as you mentioned that in Hinduism that's the thing, and that mergence, that amalgamation, they called Ardhanarishwar. And I love the colors that emerge from that union, right? Like it's this burst of colors and rainbow. It kind of reminded me of the Pride rainbow, and to me personally, it symbolized the fluidity of gender. Was that something you intended to show in the film?
Well, the idea is that the energy is created. Whatever we do, like in Mandala, the energy is created by the monks, the music notes, and that while the energy is prevalent, at some point it needs to come to an end. And so, what I thought was the best way to do is because of Kala Chakra and Bisuma, the deities, they are like, even though they are male and female, they're actually together. They are supposed to be one entity. And so the way to go out is instead of both of them saying that they need to come together and come down, and that's what I did. The talking about sound and music, I have to really admire Safeer that not only animation but like he's learned to become a musician too. That's something amazing. For me, one of the challenges in doing this mandala was because I wanted to do it like a Fantasia piece.
Mhm.
Normally, when we do animation, then we do go and take it, for post scoring and sound and all, right? In this one, I had to create the music first. We had to create the music. We storyboarded everything, and then we had to create a music, saying like, and then we had to animate to the tempo of the music and all that thing. So it's a little bit different in a way, and sometimes like you wish like you could go like, oh, I would want this scene to be a bit longer and maybe have this, but then the music like says like, no, you gotta keep it in that thing. So that's something that that was challenging.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Kiran, there's also a quote that your film ends with, and I truly resonate with that. It says, "For what is life but a brief moment of beauty, only to be wiped away to create something new?" Who wrote this quote, and why did you feel that you needed to end with this quote?
Uh, you know, uh, right from the beginning, we felt like, I thought like, and Mandala is supposed to be an artistic piece, and from the beginning, if you look at it, there's not a whole lot of story, it's just basically, it's a statement. And so, uh, being an art piece, I wanted to tie the our existence and life with beauty and art, and that's where the idea of like the whole process of mandala is just like when if you're a painter, you paint it, and it's basically that's what it is, art form, and so that's what it is. The meaning of life for us has to come to an end, and at some point that becomes a genesis for something else. Is the meaning behind it.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm seeing that a lot of audience questions are coming in. And before we go to that, I want to ask you all one more question. As we spoke before, animation is not very prevalent in South Asian cinema. Like, for example, in 2018 at Tasveer, we didn't have any animated films. Last year we had one, which was Asavri's Passage, and this year we have four. And Asavri, I remember you and I talking about, a dearth of animation in South Asian cinema. So, from last year to now, and this question is for all four of you. What, in your opinion, is the current state of South Asians in the field of animation? And do you think our audiences and communities are ready to take it seriously as a form of storytelling? Asa, do you want to start?
Yeah, I can't speak to what's going on in like outside of the U.S. in the sort of South Asian community. Maybe Upamanyu and Safeer and Kiran can speak to that more. But just sort of from what I know in terms of what's happening in mainstream, there's Mira Royal Detective, there's Key Happy being created. There's a bunch of things that I've heard about from other South Asian creators that are in the works. So, I mean, I don't think nothing is happening. I think slowly people are sort of getting out there. And I think it's not that there's not talent. It's not that there's not stories, but I think it's just not reached that sort of, how do I say it? It's not reached that critical mass where you can say that, oh, we have arrived. I mean, I keep seeing that there's like an enormous amount of like independent work going on in terms of South Asian animation. Just, I would say in terms of mainstream, it's getting there. And with stuff like Bombay Rose, you can't say that it's like non-existent at this point, but I think we have a long ways to go, but it's things are happening. It's exciting. And I hope, once one thing happens, more people are inspired, more people are willing to push for it. And like festivals like this, I feel like are a good place for collaborators to meet. Like I've met so many collaborators at Tasveer, like just like in one place. And, we've talked about stuff that we want to make together. So I feel like things are definitely in the works. And I feel like in the next 5 years, we should be seeing a lot more. And I feel like, if I'm not wrong, like anime is doing like really well in India, but I don't know, Upamanyu, maybe you have an like opinion about that.
Yeah, the thing that I think is we have to step back a little bit, like because with the way we're brought up, like in Southeast Asia and all, like and especially even all over Asia, art is not encouraged. Like people tell you to go become an engineer and all that stuff, and although like we have amazing artists that's in all over Asia, and I think that's one of the things, like we have problems like where parents don't encourage their kids to be an artist, and that's one of the things that's happening is where it's changing now. People used to think as animation as, oh, my kid is like playing video games, like if somebody is like creating something, that's the issue. So the knowledge was so limited that the moment you see some animation cartoon, people think like, oh, it's a child, you're playing games and all. And the fact is that there's such a huge demand for content in animation. Anime in Japan, was so successful, people see it. But then again, anime never could make it to the mainstream in the US, right? There are only hardcore fans who go and watch it. You have Korean animation, most Koreans who watch it, but it not come to the Western world. But now, from my understanding, because I'm going back from the US back to Nepal, what I'm seeing is that the tide is changing, and there's actually an appetite and hunger from the Western studios and Western audiences wanting to see something from that part of the world. And I think as people like Asavari, Safeer, and they start exploring, experimenting. And I'm not saying just from like a commercial point of view, but like just exploring and all that thing. I think in the next 5-10 years, there's going to be a huge demand for content coming from that side, right? The last 5-10 years, like people will always look at Southeast Asia as like, I have some work, I need to outsource it. But now they're actually coming and saying, hey, do you have something that we could tell a story? Do you have superhero characters in India? Do you have superhero characters in so they're actually coming and looking for those. And I think we're at a really amazing time that I think in the next 5 or 10 years, we're going to be creating something really unique. And I think the world is going to see animation from a different point of view. Like, it's going to be not just the Disney Pixar style, but there's going to be so many different styles of animation coming out in terms of look. I really believe in that.
That's so well said. Upamanyu, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's when you graduate, especially if you have studied something relevant. We have worked with a lot of people who haven't studied art or animation, but there's a lot of natural talent out there as well. But if in case you do study and you start to consider the natural career path for yourself, it is a little disillusioning in a place like India, which is a good thing because instead of thinking about which job people are going to take, more and more people are deciding that, you know what, there's not a job that I'd like to do in the current market. It doesn't pay well enough. It doesn't, like, no one's making that kind of stuff. So why don't we just do it in that sense? So they're contemporary to us. There are a lot of small Indian studios which are coming up with are usually around a project. Like they make a project, they're excused to come together in that sense, and they make something, and there's more films per year, and like mathematically you'll have 16 films at Tasveer next year from South Asian animators.
Fingers
So,
crossed.
yeah, and yeah, so it's good. Like there are a lot of like Asavari was saying, maybe it's not mainstream yet. We don't have a if let's say I stepped into a European festival, the kind of co-production opportunities that animation has, the kind of film markets animation has in Europe or something like that. We don't have that yet, but we also, as an animation community, may not have given everyone enough to go on. So it kind of goes both ways in that sense. Yeah.
Safeer, do you want to wrap up this question? I would love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I completely agree with Sir Kiran on that. That in Asia specifically, parents don't want their children to become an artist, and they don't encourage this. Same happens to me. If we see on the animation perspective, we have a very limited, you can say, specific audience for that. Because in Pakistan, I would say it will considered as a kids thing, like cartoon, it's a kid thing. They don't see message. When they see a visual in a cartoon style, they will say it's a kids thing. So I think, but the things are going on the good direction. We are coming on that, but India is very good, doing good in animation and all things. Pakistan is a little, you can say, backward on that. Many things. So that's it. I think specific audience in Pakistan.
Inshallah, as you said, things are changing, and I hope that it picks up. And because, yeah, I mean, from what you're all saying, that animation gives you such a big way of, showing emotions, and that live films. I don't know what you call them. I'm losing that word right now, but live action cinema it's not the same. So yeah, inshallah, in Pakistan also it'll grow, and in South Asia in itself, right? Like I hope it gets to a point where we can say we've gotten there. With that, I'm going to dive into our audience questions.
Can I add like one small thing before we jump to audience questions? Like I feel like also listening to what everyone has said, like right now live action is struggling a little bit because of COVID, but animation is really thriving. So, anyone that is even like on the cusp of like, should I make a film? Just make it. Make stuff, like grab people, like do whatever you can. So if someone's like iffy about it, this is the time to do it for sure.
Yeah. Thank you. And I really hope our audiences who are listening get inspired. And, as Upamanyu said, there are natural talents. So maybe you don't need to have like a full-blown education in that. With that, my first question, Upamanyu, is for you. Rakhi asks, Upamanyu, are you an animal lover?
Yes.
Based on your film.
Yeah, and especially in terms of the amount of wildlife we've shown in the film, whether it's like, it's number one from an animation perspective. They're super interesting in terms of. So we spent a lot of time. I don't personally support zoos, but we did have to spend a lot of time in a zoo studying tigers in order to figure out. And they're just absolutely majestic living beings. I just everything about them I could completely nerd out right here in terms of like
Go for it.
what
This is your
makes
space.
these animals work, what just the sheer amount of weight and muscle power and everything that makes them move in that sense is just you don't stand a chance in that sense. And yeah, and from another point of view, Kolkata and most such cities, they're cut out from tiger land in that sense. Like 300 years ago, there were tigers all over here. So we've literally beaten them back to build the cities that we had. So if we're looking to the future, it's a kind of cyclical reckoning in that sense. So, and tigers are a major part of our folklore as well in terms of bedtime stories. The tigers are the go-to villains in bedtime stories. Like it's at least to local to Bengal, that's the situation. You eat your food, otherwise a tiger will get you. They're the boogeyman for us.
True, true, true.
Yeah, and also like in animated films, when you make animated films, you don't hurt the animals. So
True. That is very well said, Kiran. Very, very well said. My next question, guys, the audience questions are coming. Some of them might be a little bit of repetition from the questions I've asked. So feel free to like expand more on whatever the audience is asking. Where did my screen go? Yes. Someone from our audience asks, what are the newer forms of animation? I have seen on Instagram that people take pictures and use a digital pen to swipe on it to create caricatures, etc. So, whoever wants to take this?
They are talking about animals.
yeah, I mean, like by definition, animation is to make things move, right? And in the process, you're telling a story. So when people take pictures from their iPhone and all, and then do some visual, interpretation and all, if it's a still, it's an art. But if you can tell a story from it, then you can say it's an animation. It doesn't have to be all just visual drawing and all. You could combine like Asavari's stuff, your augmented reality, and you could combine live action and animation. So there's so many varieties. The idea that people, when you talk about animation, I think we need to make it very clear that it's just a technique, right? Animation. But at the end of the day, all of us are telling a story, and whatever visual medium that you do it, at the heart of it, it's how do you tell a story that can connect with other people. I mean, I think that's the thing, and for some people who are like really fascinated and all that thing, and they may not be able to draw or doesn't have uh, animation tools like that. Experimenting like that, taking pictures and doing stuff like that, and you're creating something is a great way to get yourself in.
That's a great answer. Safeer, I know you were saying something. Would you want to add something to this?
No, Kiran sir played it well. But if we see a word of animation, if we break it out, we have a motion. So if things are moving, it's an animation and telling a story. And if they are still, it's an art piece. Kiran sir explained it well.
Nice.
Yeah, and also in general, I think if I
Yeah, please.
the animation in terms of experimentation is a whole other universe, which operates parallel to our universe of drawn animation and CG animation and all of that stuff, where people are doing absolutely anything they can to generate motion. Like there are films I've seen in the festival circuit this year which have used statistics softwares to just create abstract imagery, and then they've kind of distilled that into motion. So like, yeah, as long as, like Kiran said, as long as you're putting frames one after the other and letting them play. You're animating. People have used MRI scans. People have
Wow.
used, yeah, as in it's people will use anything to get whatever's in their head out there in terms of medium. So,
That is
and
so
yeah,
innovative.
exactly. So it doesn't really matter. Like there are many people who have made animation careers without having ever drawn a frame at all, but they're able to tap into something very primal, very abstract, very elevated on a plane that, let's say, something more literal, like, okay, here's my character design in front, side, and back, won't do in that sense. So it's a medium that can do a lot more in that sense.
That's amazing. Asavri, do you want to add something here before we move on to the next question?
I mean, I think you guys basically explain it really well. Like, it doesn't, necessarily have to be character-driven storytelling. I mean, storytelling can operate on like a whole different level. It can be purely experiential. I think when you sort of move into the realm of motion graphics, you don't necessarily even have to look at like characters and spaces telling stories in the sort of regular like film language way we sort of perceive it. There's like scratch on film, there's like sand animation, there's a lot of sort of things that you just have like a reaction to, where you're feeling, you have an emotional journey, or you have like a physical sensation with like sound and image and motion. So it can happen on a lot of different levels when we and which is why I think it's interesting when animation is called a genre and not a medium, because it is a medium. It's not,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very well said. It is a medium. It's not a genre. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for that amazing, amazing answer. Our next question is again to Upamanyu. Roshni asks, what is the significance of some people with sight and some without sound? I think she means without sight and without sound.
Right. It's something I think we did touch upon earlier
Yeah.
as well in terms of, but again, in general, what we're trying to do, in addition to, yes, we're telling a climate change story, and on top of that, we're telling a climate change fiction, and then on top of that, we're trying to, on some level, build a climate change mythology in that sense, in terms of slightly mythical characters, because tapping into the kind of mythology and legendarium you have in places like the Sundarbans, where you have characters with very clear characteristics in that sense, like a demon who has a specific that this is the defining trait of so and so character. Like we do tend to use archetypes and uh, things like that. For us, largely, I think blindness was a vessel for incapability in that sense. Like in terms of, what if you can't participate meaningfully in the situation, you can't save yourself, you can't like for in particular for the girl on the raft, in that sense she can hear everything but she can't see things, so that poses a distinct disadvantage in that particular situation. But eventually, like, let's say the tigress who walks on water, who shares that thing, but can walk on water, so even though, so at least that tiger has a way of surviving the situation, and that, if you notice, gets passed on to this girl. So we're just thinking of what connections characters could make without saying things like, "Hey, I can't survive this. Can you?" Like,
Yeah.
eh, so again, the brief we did give ourselves was we have to tell this story without words, without anything, because this should play without subtitles anywhere. It shouldn't. People don't know where Kolkata is normally. Like, it's not a New York. It's not a. So like, there's not a bunch of distinct things that you can just put there and people plug in to the context. So you just have to give them little points of interest within that to go with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Very, very nuanced. I must say, very nuanced in the way you've connected the characters with these small designing choices. Our next question again is to all our panelists. Sanjana asks, do you feel that animation and children's books, when viewed as intertwined narratives, have the potential to embody a wider, more equitable and just worldview? Do you want me to read the question again?
No, we got the
Very
question.
good.
It's just a very good question.
That's a very good, very deep question. You notice how everybody just had to step back and think about it. No, it is definitely. I mean, like, children's book, a good children's book really evokes kids' imagination and then take them to a different dimension in their thought process and their feelings, right? And I think animation should do that too, right? Animation also does that, and that's probably why, I always thought like, why do people always say like kids love animation, more than the adults? And I really think part of it, I always think is like because kids, kids have this thing where they're very open-minded. We could show something they can really think of they can process it their own way and visualize and think about the stuff, right? And I think that's why when we do something in animation, they allow them, like let's say a character like what, Upamanyu, you're talking about the tiger character, and they can visualize that tiger to be something in their own world and all. So I guess the question that you're saying, I'm actually it's such a deep. It can definitely like the combination of children's book and animation can definitely like really, really help in terms of child development, brain and all. Is that the question?
I can read the question again. Do you feel that animation and children's books, when viewed as intertwined narratives, have the potential to embody a wider, more equitable and just worldview?
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean that's why. I mean, I think that's why, like, when a lot of the good animated films, is picked up from children's book, right? There's amazing children's book, and then they go and they say, wow, they without even thinking, they go and make an animated film out of it. I think they're really connected.
Yeah, very, very true. Does Upamanyu, Safeer, Asavri, yeah, go for it, Upamanyu.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I think children are the best of us in every sense of the term. So anything we make is, I mean, I make all weight adult animation, but our most enthusiastic audiences have been 5-year-olds, which is messed up on some levels, but like it does work on other levels. But like Kiran said this, so they have a much more profound understanding of the world than we do. And I think a lot of children's writing and a lot of children's animation kind of talks down to them instead of appreciating the fact that they're way smarter than we ever will be in that sense, and they're getting smarter by the year. And in terms of, so that's on one level that yes, like especially if you have a story that's worth telling in animation, it's definitely also. So, for example, in our studio, there's one fellow. He's one of the partners. He's building a game, but also turning that into a children's book because it's not as likely that everyone will play the game, have access to the game, have access to Vimeo. So, in terms of at least a spread of a story, a book is obviously like it's the greatest invention of all time. But even from a scene building point of view, if one looks at anime, if one looks at French animation, there is a major history of it coming from a print version first, like Kiran was saying. But like that's where you build an appreciation for a certain kind of storytelling, and then you can from comics, children's books, picture books, and then you can build it to that, or vice versa. Like you can reverse engineer a good animated story into a decent children's book whenever you just need to take screenshots. So yeah.
That's very well said. Yeah. Safeer, Asavri, do you want to add something to this?
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting question, and the answer is obviously yes. I mean, I feel like a lot of us started with sequential narratives in that format. Like children's books and comic books was definitely my first love. Before I even knew animation existed, and somewhere in my mind, I was definitely making things move without them actually moving for me just yet. But I think the forms are very complementary. Like I did turn my previous film into a comic book for exactly the same reason, like access, like Upamanyu was talking about. I think the film can exist in its own level, but there's this whole sort of independent self-publishing space where you have like kids and parents and families sort of coming. It is a wider audience where you actually get to talk to people. They get to flip through, like tangible things and like ask questions about characters that they can't necessarily do in like film form. So I think those are both like valid and complementary mediums. But yeah, I mean, I think it is interesting because that is happening, right? Like what Kiran said, like Pashmina, I believe, started out as like a graphic novel, and it's now being made into a sort of like mainstream, animation. So it's something that is already happening, and it is kind of like a good proof of concept. You can make like a storybook much quicker than you can make an animated film. So even if you want to sort of like test the waters and be like, hey, are you interested in this like comic book? And that's how one of my films started. I sort of made a comic book, 6-page comic book, and asked kids if they would want to see it, and people were excited about it, so we turned it into a film. So it's like they're like, they work well together, I think, both the mediums.
Yeah, very well said. Safeer?
Yeah, I think we should have to see the target audience for that. And for animation and comic book or storybook, we basically need a story which has a meaning. And when we have a story, we can make it animation or a comic book, or we can go on a video. So the basic thing is story which has a meaning, I think, and we can convert it in anything we want. It should be animation, book, or video. Yeah.
Awesome. Beautifully said, guys. Our next question is from Shireen. Shireen asks, animation is known to take a very long time to make. What's the longest time you've spent on a project?
I don't know if I should say it or not. I actually worked on a project for 4 years. This was when I was
Wow.
at Disney. We worked on a project for 4 years. Yeah, it takes that long sometimes, like, because especially like in a big studio, where you have somebody comes up with a story idea, and then you put together a small team. You start doing like while the storyboarding is happening, visual development. The whole process can take about 4 years, and then it's only the last year where the entire crew comes to finish the production, right? But the first 3 years can be a small team of people that just doing all the stuff that's in thing. And so, yeah, I have worked on a project for like 4 years. So we used to say that at Disney, like, I was there for 18 years. You can only make 5 movies, So I think so for me, like coming out of a big studio and doing your own gives you that freedom. You can like do a small project or big, you can go at your own pace. So yeah.
Yeah, that's
And people do get tired after when you work on the same project, and because there's so many things happening, story notes from the executives and going, and then they go like, okay, this is not going, we go back to another. There's so many movies like, and they do really good. Like ultimately they make it, like Pixar has this thing, like, the movie is not greenlit till it's completed. Like, like for example, like Toy Story 1, they went and did it for 2 years, and they say like back to the drawing table, and they went. So, like audience only sees the end product, but the process can take really long.
that's amazing
And
insight.
and that's not only in animation. Like if you look at it even in live action, like look at how long it took James Cameron to make Avatar, right? The first Avatar, and now he's doing the second and third. And I mean, they take a long time, and they spend a lot of their energy and passion. But at the end of the day, like if you're doing that, and no matter how long it is, if your heart is it and it's your story and all, you're gonna be having a good time.
That's
I mean,
awesome. That's so well said, Kiran. Before I move on to our next question, there are some amazing compliments that our audiences want to share with you. So I'm just going to read them one by one. Some of our audience members have not given their names. So an anonymous compliment is, I love what Safeer said, that as an animator, you can make a story single-handedly without depending on a big crew. So go, Safeer. Our next compliment is from Dushyant. Dushyant compliments great representation from different parts of the subcontinent and the diaspora in the films and the filmmakers. So, we spoke about how South Asia, and also I'm loving the representation here. Our next compliment is fantastic new representation of sand in Mandala. It is it's exquisitely rendered, and to me, it is a true piece of spiritual art. So these are some of the compliments. Our next question, Asavri, actually is for you. Deepak asks, what are the challenges of being a woman working in the animation industry, which is traditionally very male dominated?
I can't speak to that personally because I've been a freelancer and I've sort of hopped in and out of projects. So I feel like anytime I felt like there was any kind of weird juju at a project, I would sort of like push back against it and beyond a point. If there were too many creative differences, I would eventually step away. But my goal had always been to sort of create, knowing that this is something that is problematic and it is something that I've discussed within like many sort of different animation forms for like women, POC, and non-binary folks. Like there are, these are challenges that you face. But I think because it was so much in my head that I actively tried to like stay away from a lot of things where I heard like, oh, the studio doesn't treat women well, or like people have had bad experiences at these studios. I basically decided to create my own studio where women, non-binary folk, like POC, are all welcome to like come work from wherever they are, like be comfortable. And we prioritize hiring folks that have these sort of struggles being minorities in the animation industry. So that's like my sort of, it was also for me to create a space and to build a space around me in which I would be comfortable, but also have the space serve someone other than myself and also serve like the community that is struggling. I have been fortunate to have like a lot of allies. So whenever there have been problems, and I've worked in like tech, advertising, a little bit in feature animation. However, there have been problems, where there's been like passive aggressive behavior and stuff like that. I've always found allies, and there's, at least in LA, there's lots of really wonderful sort of communities like Women in Film, Panimation, Women in Animation, that you can sort of like join and discuss and sort of like air these grievances. And because there is a community, I have felt like more sort of empowered to continue doing what I'm doing and like not really get in my head about it, so that it stops me from actually like operating as a creative person.
Yeah.
I was going to say, Asvari actually mentioned it, like, women in animation that started about 4 years ago is really leading that front, where basically, there's a really, women are like represented very, under, right? Like if you look at a lot of films also, not only in animation, but even in live action, there are very few directors that they put into it. And in animation too, like, there's this thing about like, they don't choose women to be directors and all, not because there's no talent, but about last 4 years ago, women in animation, they're become vocal and put this thing where they have a really good program where like they, studios are now being watched to make sure what is the representation of women in their workforce, how are like upcoming new women animators and all are being, mentored, and there's presentations and talks by, experienced women. And so that's happening in the US. I do think in Southeast Asia, because I go back and forth, I do see that's something that we need to work on, because in Southeast Asia, not only in terms of like the director and upper leadership roles, but even in an artist role, families don't encourage females to go and be an animator. For some reason, they go like, oh, you don't want to be an animator. You should really go and study business and something like that, and push that thing. So it's been, if you really look at, we do some statistics and we go and look at studios in like in Southeast Asia, it's very, very represented very low. I would say like maybe like 15 to 20% of the workforce in a studio would be women. And I think that's something we need to change.
100%. We need to change that. And Asavri, good for you. I am so happy that, you created your own studio and you created that space. So all power to you. Kiran, this is a great segue into my next question. Someone asks, how has animation changed over the last couple of decades? are there more South Asians in the field now? Like you spoke a little about how, female representation is not there, but do you have more representation of POC and South Asians in the field? Like with your experience, can you talk a little bit about the change?
Yeah, it's because here's the problem with people are perceiving everything from the Western world, right? So but if you really go back, like if in Japan and all, anime has been there forever, right? It's just that people out here are just starting to, except for the hardcore, the rest of people are just starting to see all these movies that Miyazaki and all are making. Here also, what's happening is people are not, over the last 20, 25 years, like more and more artists from Southeast Asia are like starting to like really shine. Some of the best character designers are like from Korea and Japan and all. Like there's a guy named Jin Kin, like who designed all these main characters from like Entangled and all those things. So these guys are getting to be popular. Before you would only hear about American names, and or French, artists or something like. But now like they're really and now also like what I was saying is that studios are like looking at and saying like, how can we make films, animated films that has these guys as the director, as the production designer, and that because they'll bring something fresh, they'll bring their own sensibility. So that's starting to happen, and I think there's been a lot of change. I think that's a good thing. And what's helping all of that? What's helping all of that is the streaming. Because obviously everything is driven by money, right? Before, when a film is made, it does really good in the box office in the US and Canada and all, and it's you can earn a lot of money in Southeast Asia and all. But with all the streaming platforms like Netflix, Amazon, everything, which is now accessible all over the world, people can watch those things. So now all of a sudden they realize, we need to create content that is like very applicable to the rest of the world. And so I think that's going to change a lot.
That's amazing. That's very well said. And it's good to know that slowly but surely there is some change happening even with the bigger production houses. They're telling me that, we don't have much time, so 5 more minutes. And I have a couple more questions that I can touch on. Audience members, I'm sorry if I don't touch all your questions. Thank you so much for engaging with our panels, but, time. So my next question is to Upamanyu. Wade reminded me of the book, The Hungry Tide by Amitav Ghosh. Was that something that was part of your research?
Not a part of our research per se. I read it well after the script stage, in addition to another book by Amitav Ghosh called The Great Derangement, which I really suggest us reading because it's a very good. It's more of a long essay on climate change and what its domino effect can really be in terms of, we just think rising sea levels, but we don't think mass migration, we don't think economic failure, we don't think of a lot of unintended consequences. But The Hungry Tide itself bases itself on a lot of very well-known Sundarbani lore. And what was very good for The Hungry Tide was it was one of the first pieces of literature that managed to take it to the world, in terms of all the stories of the gods of Sundarbans and the way the people coexist with tigers in that situation. So Amitav Ghosh did a very good job of taking that story, and usually mythology doesn't translate very well to English, in my opinion, but I think he did a very good job of it because he's just a very proficient writer. And so once we read it, we did see, of course, there are a lot of overlaps in terms of the man versus nature aspect, the this, the that. So it's a very good book, and I definitely
That's
suggest
amazing.
it.
Like
Yeah.
I love that, that connection of the book as an art, and how that got connected for one of our audience members with your
Yeah,
film.
excellent.
I love it. And I saw you whoop a little when I asked you that question. So fantastic. Someone in the audience asks, and this is again to everybody, absolutely enjoyed watching each film. I'd like to get an idea on approximate budget for each film, just a general idea. Is there an average cost per minute? I'm also intrigued to know this because, you guys have all such different experiences. So, Safeer, why don't we start with you? I haven't heard from you in a long time.
I think it depends on the narrative or the story, how many characters and what they actually want, and the effects. So, is it in 3D or 2D, and is it or cell animation, anything? So, I think it depends on the description by the, you know, customer, I must say. So, it depends, it varies.
Yeah, to be honest with you, because I run a studio, when you're doing a project, you know your budget, and based on that thing, you know what are the number of characters, what the story and how sophisticated it needs to be and all that thing. In the project that I did, because this is one of the exciting thing about being able to do your own stuff. I purposely didn't want to put a budget because we wanted to do it as an experimental, to be able to do that. And so when we were working on it, we never tracked like who worked and how many hours and all those things. So to be honest with you, I really don't know how much it cost because the goal was really that everybody brings something to the table and do something that they enjoy and then create art piece. So that's the thing. But like what Safeer said, like yeah, in when you're working on a commercial project, obviously based on what the client's requirements and all, and animation can range a lot. Like uh, there are movies that there are animated films that they spend $130 million to make, right? Look at all the Disney Pixar movies. They're more than $130 million to make a film, but then they also generate a lot of money. And then there are independent small studios that'll make a movie for $10 million, or you can make a movie for $50,000. So it's I think it's hard to. Uh, it's I don't think we should put, especially for the form that we're in, like for the shorts and all. I don't think we should put a budget. If it's something that you want to do it, and it's something that you believe, you just go do it.
Yeah,
You know.
that's great piece of
I,
advice.
I, I think if we say I'm going to do an animated short that I'm going to then send it out to 2021 festival and I'm going to do $20,000, $10,000, I think that's a really bad way to approach it for especially like thing. I think you got to just go do and visual, and then and then as you go through you'll find what's the best efficient way and all, and all that stuff.
I can actually speak more clearly to the budget for this particular one because it was, it was created from grant money. So the grant was $5,000 and we had a limited amount of time, specific software that we needed to use. And we actually did, like Kiran is saying, we worked backwards from that number in terms of how much time we had, how many people were, willing to contribute their time, because that is obviously not a fair price for a team, but it was a collaboration and we split the money, as best we could. But it's not something that I would say reflects the actual value of, what you would put into that film. But because it was sort of created for the purposes of a grant, it did have like a hard and fast number around it, which we worked backwards from. Yeah.
Interesting. Upamanyu, do you want to add something? I'll ask my last question after this, and then we'll have to sadly wrap up this amazing conversation. So, yeah.
For us, we specific to our film, Wade, two things ended up happening. One was my co-director and I, we ended up spending a lot of our own time, which is unbudgeted for, in that sense. But we, from our personal savings, we spent about 600,000 rupees or 6 lakh rupees. And we also did a crowdfunding of an equivalent amount. Like we asked for 400,000 rupees. We ended up getting 600,000 rupees from the crowdfunding. And in that sense, again, to build on what Asavari said, what you're really talking about is how many people, instead of per minute and all of that stuff, you're talking about how many people do I need on this and how do I make it worth their time in terms of like, how do I, especially if I'm bringing someone in, am I getting their tickets? Am I taking care of their stay? Do they just come in for a month? So those are the costs really. Like you're really asking people to give a large chunk of time to something that you think is important for some reason, and then you just have to make it worth their thing as well. So we just have to work backwards, like from a unitary method of how many people get how much fair salary and get the project done in how much time. So that's the usual calculus. Yeah.
That's such a great way to approach your project, right? That way, like the success is more important than the finances of it. And as Kiran said, like, your art and your story will be more like it'll be more profound if you don't approach it in that way. So thank you so much, guys. And I'm gonna end with one last question. What is next for you all? So Upamanyu, because you're on my screen, why don't you go first?
Okay. So for us, we have the small studio in Kolkata. We simultaneous to it, we released another 3 animated short films, and we have 4 more short films releasing this year. And after that, I'm personally working on an animated feature film right now. So which is in development. It got some development grants, so it's got nothing to do with climate change or anything, and that's the fun part because we can just be interested in many different things and then put time into that kind of stuff. There's another series that Kalp is developing. Kalp isn't here; he would have had fun, but he's developing a series, my feature film, and just generally carrying on and just figuring out our lives in the middle of whatever this year was. So, yeah.
True crazy times. Yeah. Kiran, what about you?
Personally, I'm like, the Mandala was a great experience for me because, after Disney, then I went and set up a studio and I was caught up in trying to be in that world of expanding. So Mandala was a really, very refreshing to be able to step out of that. So I'm actually focusing a lot of time. I have like 3 projects that I'm in development here, and one of them is a Mandala feature film that we're trying to make and take it to Netflix, and also we're working with some producing partners now. So I have 3 projects, but I all my stories are like based from that part of the world. It's stories that's like like bring something from that part of the world to this side. So it's almost like Eastern stories with a Western for the Western audience. I'm doing the opposite of what they're doing. I know Western stories take to the Eastern. My goal is bring the Eastern stories and bring it to the Western world. So that's what I'm working on.
Good luck with that. I can't wait to
Thank you.
see. Safeer, what about you? What's next for you?
Uh, I'm doing job, and I think I will doing it a couple of years. And after that, with that, I will make another animation. For that, I will work, but it will take a lot of time, and it will become more harder with the job, I think. And I'm a married man, so I have give time to my wife, family, and blah blah blah. So I think I don't know, but things are going on.
Well, inshallah, I hope something great comes along for you. Asavri, what about you?
Since January, I've been in development with a feature animation screenplay, working on some short stories that will either take the form of short films or some other short format narrative, maybe comics. I'm also working with a friend on developing a series, and in talks with various other friends to make various other things. So one way or another, I hope to at least create either individually or collectively like a project that's meaningful every year, just to sort of stay kind of creative and stay practicing. Because of course, like I have a studio, we're doing a couple of really fun projects with Google, and that's another part of my existence as a creative person, as a designer and creative director. But I want to make sure that the balance is maintained with like creating commercial projects that are stimulating, but also creating like personal work which feels a little more like meaningful and intimate in that sense. Yeah.
That's amazing, guys. I cannot wait to see all your future projects. Maybe next year, maybe the year after at our festival. We'll be so happy to have you all back. And with that, sadly, as they say, all good things must come to an end. So we have to end our session today. Thank you, panelists. Thank you to our audience members for joining us. It was such a pleasure to have all of you with us. Even though it was just as you say, it was virtual, but it was such a pleasure talking to all of you. To our audiences, come back. We have 2 more days of the festival, and we have some. No, sorry, 2 more days of the festival, and we have some amazing films. And watch all the films on demand. Good night, good day to all of them, and thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Thanks everybody.